Hi, hello, and happy time zone. My name is Wes, and this tutorial is on advanced for loop techniques inside of Qlik's data load editor. This lesson is going to cover for loops, how variables can be used effectively inside of for loops, how to iterate over inline tables with loops, and a better way I'll show you later how to loop over inline tables. A couple of side notes about $sign expansion, in other words, this little guy right here, and then set and let with variables. This tutorial assumes you have a basic familiarity with Qlik and a scripting language, but let's hop right in. I want to start with a simple for loop example that demonstrates how to use trace statements for debugging, and we can do that over inside of Qlik. So I'm going to zoom on in, make it easier for everybody to see. If I type for and then pause and do nothing else, we can enter the help mode, click this, and immediately go to the documentation. I'm not going to read all this, but you can see the syntax, you can see the arguments, the definitions, you can even see a couple of examples, and a little section over here for learning more for similar related items. But we already have all the info we need to succeed. Whenever I type out for or if or any other keyword that has a pairing end word, it's a good habit to immediately start to type that as well to end the sentence before you fill in with the subject, verbs, adjectives, and everything else. So let's see. I'm going to type out some sort of variable name so we can keep track of how we're iterating. I need to have some defined beginning to some defined end, and then we want to do something with it. And again, we have a new word right here. What are we going to do with it? So you can think of this like a print statement, like a to the standard output statement, logging, however you want to think about it in your brain. It's going to be our helpful tool to understand what the value of this variable is as we are iterating. But common pitfall number one, if we just type this, it's not going to do what we expect. We have to make sure to do funny little syntax inside of Qlik that I'll explain soon enough, and it'll actually realize to how we wish. It says, I'm going to start at 1 to our defined end of 5 and step up 1 at every step along the way. That's pretty cool. It looked like it did every single thing that we were expecting. The trace statements, as you saw, appear in the script execution progress window. They can help you monitor the execution flow and expect variable values during the runtime. Trace statements really are your best friends when you're unsure about why something's not working as expected. But a side note, but $sign expansion, I kind of just did it for you, gave you the answer, but let's talk a little bit more about the why and the how. It allows you to reference the content of a variable rather than just the variable name itself. It's done by surrounding the variable with parentheses, putting a $sign in front. This first example here is not going to result in any dynamic output. And we can see that over here inside of Qlik. If I go pull this up to the very top, ignore anything else inside of my script, and just paste, it's pretty similar to what we just did. It goes from 1 through 3, and it tries to load from a pretend table that doesn't exist. It's referencing the v loop inside of here, but let's actually take a gander at what that does. It does, in fact, repeat 3 times. This part is not wrong. It just does not understand how to parse and read that variable. But if we step back over here, and we see another example. The only single difference here is that it's actually correctly using $sign expansion. I'm going to copy this, bring you back over, do a quick paste, and just walk through before we hit play. It's going to go 1 through 3, but it's actually $expanding that variable. If we save, if we load, it actually does table 1 through 3. If we had these files locally, we could in fact concatenate them. We could put everything together. But it's an important thing to remember that $sign expansion does not happen until the script runtime before the statement is executed. This means Qlik doesn't even know what the value of the variable is going to be until runtime. But we can actually see how that variable is going to happen. Let's show you right here. If I click the debug menu and then we zoom in right here, in between the numbers and the actual coding space, if you click, it'll leave a little breakpoint. And on that debug menu that we opened, we can run from the top to the section. It'll stop right there. And the $expanded variable is actually going to be right here. We know it's a 1. We can even step inch by inch and see it goes from a 1 to a 2 to a 3. In our simple little program, it's not necessarily hard to understand, but the larger, more behemoth size that your apps become, it's more likely that you're going to need something like this. For loops can be made even more flexible by using variables to control their behavior. This example right here starts at year 2020, it iterates to 2023, stepping 1 year at a time. Variables make your scripts more maintainable and adaptable, and these are all words that we wanted to describe us and how we code. So for loops using variables, going to focus only on that script. I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to steal a little bit of the definition from the slides that I have prepared. Just three variables that I already voice tracked right there. And if we want to have the basic structure of a loop, I can begin with that. So we want to start from some value. We want to go to some value. Here's another thing we could have seen in the documentation. We can step at a certain incrementation right here. So I can go from 2020 to 2023 one step at a time, but VLOOP, that's no longer as descriptive, and we want to be verbose when possible. So I can update this to say processing data for year and then $expand and paste that in. So what's going to happen? All right. So it does say 2020 to 2023 at the steps that it says, and we can even dynamically update this because of the power of variables that we have access to and step 2 years at a time. This is being more dynamic. We are realizing a little bit more of success rate here. But I want to take another side note. What is the deal with set? What is the deal with let? And how are they different? And how should we utilize them? When working with variables and loops, it's crucial to understand this difference. Set assigns the literal text string to the value. It does not evaluate expressions or perform $sign expansion for you. It's useful if you want to store formulas or expressions as text. We just cared about numbers like 2020 and 2023 in our previous example. Very easy use for set. Let, however, evaluates the expression and assigns the resulting value to the variable. It performs calculation and $sign expansion for you and is generally preferred in scripting for dynamic values. Let's see how they behave differently inside of a loop. Understanding this distinction helps prevent common errors in your Qlik scripts, especially when you're working with loops and dynamic expressions, but it's always easier to show than tell. Let's go over to set and let, only focus on that one particular section. So using set, a very literal approach, again, 3 loops right here. If we say set value to vloop times 10, what's going to happen? Set is your friend who does not understand the joke at the party. They are taking it very literally. It's only repeating the same thing over and over. If we take the other example that was present on the slide and bring it over, we are using let right here. Do we have to $expand? Let's see. Let's check it out. We actually don't. Because we are using let, Qlik is smart enough to know that this value is a variable that has something. We can take it, we can use it inside of this expression and be more dynamic. This is a very simple example, but I hope you can see the power that can be possible with set and let. Going on to the second chapter of this video, how can we loop through an inline table like this? How can we look at all the pretty colors one step at a time? Qlik's inline tables are a quick and easy way to store data and process that data. But let's bring this on over to Qlik. Let's actually get our hands on this code. Going over to chapter 2, I'm just going to go ahead and paste this inline table right here into our code. The syntax is pretty simple. We have the name of the table. We want to load everything from an inline source, which we can type right here. We have a field name named color, and then we have all the colors that we want to care about. So what are we going to do with this? How are we going to process this inline table and see one color at a time? Let's take it step by step. I want to have a for loop, just like we did previously. I want to call it vloop. We need some start. We don't know what we want right now. Let's just type 1. And how are we going to get the number of rows in this table? Well, another thing that we can do is if we just start typing, Qlik's going to show us options. And if we hover over it, it'll give us a description of what that function is going to do. The number of rows function returns the number of rows, records in a previously loaded inline table. Well, that's awesome. It just is previously loaded table, but ours is inline. And we want to get this right here, the name of the table. So it's going to go from 1 to 7, the number of colors of the rainbow. That's awesome. What do we do now? Well, we want to get the color. So let's go backwards. We want to have some variable that's going to relate to it. And we just talked about set and let, so we can use let, and then we need to define it somehow, but what's going to go right here? There's a documentation function we can look at, peek. Peek finds the value of a field in a table for a row that has already been loaded or exists in internal memory, and then it takes some arguments. That sounds awesome. It sounds like what we need, but it looks like it took a couple arguments. Let's just check the documentation. Right? It takes the field name, so it's not going to look at the table name. That means we have to get color right here. And let's go back to that. I don't think I'm done looking yet. If you ever see this in the documentation, the brackets, I mean that is optional. So theoretically, we could just run this, but let's investigate some more. Row number, that's the second one. Let's see, blah, 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 has to resolve to an integer. Oh, okay. 0 denotes the first record, 1 the second, and so on. Negative numbers indicate the end of the table. Oh, -1 is assumed if we don't put a record number. In other words, this would just pick violet over and over and over, and that's absolutely not what we want. Well, to me, it sounds like we want to pass in the value of VLoop, but if you remember the documentation, it says peak has a 0 start. So if we type 1 here, it's going to grab orange and not red. So let's grab the 0. Something that is kind of assumed when you're reading through this is not said out loud is that because 0 is the start, it also means it's going to end one early. If we type 7, it's going to go outside the table because 6 is actually the index number from Peak's perspective to the end of the table. We can fix that really quickly by adding a -1 right here. And now that we have done all the structure, we can see that all the colors of the rainbow are being printed as we expected. And while this code worked very well for our purpose, it required a number of different methods. It required like variables to keep track of information. If only there was a better way. Oh, wait, there is. So FieldValueList is a method inside of Qlik that can reference an existing field and get a list of its values for quick and easy iteration. Let's go ahead and walk through this. If I bring down or up this one right here, only focus on that. I'm going to bring in a new table for reasons that I will explain soon, but it's just a slightly more complicated version than what we had. It has 2 columns as opposed to 1, a unique product ID, and then some category that's related to it. Well, I've already said what the method is, so let's just type it out and look at the documentation. FieldValueList. It's a weird color, and it actually doesn't work. So this is not a traditional function that you can expect to use inside of Qlik. It's really part of another function. If we go ahead and type 4 and then go back to that documentation that we saw before, it's actually going to be right over here. FieldValueList is subsetted under for each next. And to explain that a little bit more, if we go over here, for each variable in some sort of list, and it talks about var, I don't know, tell me more about list. So list has this syntax. It looks like list can be a lot of things, a constant, an expression, and also a field value list max. So the syntax iterates through the values of a field that is already loaded into QlikSense. That sounds pretty awesome, but I want to see it in action. Let's search for it. I found an example here. For each A in field value list of a field, which is the name of a field in some sort of inline table, and then it does something with it. That seems exactly like what we're looking for. So I actually did not stay true to the advice that I gave you, but it was going to be, what is it, for each, and we're going to have some value name. I want to go over each of the categories. So for each V category, that's going to be the variable that we iterate over in field value list, and we want to get the field name, so category right here. And what are we going to do with it? I don't know. We can say processing category and then $expand this value right here. And what's going to happen? And this is why I brought a different inline table in. FieldValueList allows us to not only iterate over a field from a table, getting all the values in a list, it does so by preserving uniqueness. I think that's pretty wonderful. It's a very quick, easy, efficient way to go through a particular field. And in my opinion, the 4H pattern is much cleaner than the traditional approach that we have been using. Notice how we don't have to count the number of values of a table. We don't have to keep track of an index variable. The for each loop automatically iterates through each of the unique values found in the category field, making your script more readable, less prone to errors. And in conclusion, for loops are cool. Trace statements help find mistakes, and you should let yourself have a good day and not be set in your ways. Thank you for watching. Hope you learned and had fun. This presentation was made with Obsidian Advanced Slides, and my related Obsidian Vault will be linked in the description. And go have fun. Go learn.